My husband claimed I exaggerated his temper. But when he shattered my phone during an argument, he didn't know everything had already been synced to the cloud, including the recordings of his previous outbursts. My husband's hand came down hard and the sound of my phone shattering filled the room. The screen splintered into jagged pieces, scattering across the tiles like broken promises. For a moment I couldn't move. I just stared at the fragments, my chest tight, my breath caught somewhere between fear and a strange, bitter calm. He thought he had silenced me, erased every trace of the arguments I had quietly stored away. What he didn't know was that the evidence of his temper had already slipped beyond his reach, living safely in the cloud. I used to tell myself my husband's temper was just stress, something temporary that would fade with time. In the early days of our marriage, his anger showed itself in small ways. Sharp words that cut deeper than I admitted, slammed doors that rattled the walls, clenched jaws that spoke louder than silence. I convinced myself it was normal. Everyone gets frustrated, I reasoned. Love could smooth over rough edges, patience could soften anger. But each incident left a faint mark, like scratches on glass that never truly disappear. At a family dinner one evening, his temper slipped out in front of everyone. My sister had made a harmless joke, something light-hearted about his forgetfulness. My husband snapped back with a tone so sharp it silenced the table. His words weren't vulgar, but they carried a sting, a humiliation that left me shrinking in my chair. My relatives exchanged uneasy glances, forks paused mid-air. Later, when I tried to explain how uncomfortable it had been, he dismissed me. "You exaggerate everything," he said, his voice calm now, almost patronizing. "It wasn't that bad." And just like that, the blame shifted onto me. That was when I began recording. At first, it wasn't about revenge. It was about sanity. I needed proof for myself, something to hold on to when he insisted I was imagining things. Each recording became a secret diary, his voice captured in moments of fury. I never listened to them right away. I stored them quietly, tucked away like hidden letters I hoped I'd never need. But knowing they existed gave me a strange comfort, a reminder that I wasn't losing my grip on reality. I remember one afternoon sitting with my closest friend over tea. I confessed the habit of recording, my voice trembling as I admitted it. She leaned forward, her eyes serious. "Denial can be dangerous," she warned. "You're protecting yourself even if you don't realize it yet." Her words stayed with me, planting a seed I couldn't ignore. I began to see the recordings not just as reassurance but as something more, something that might one day matter. The recordings became part of my routine. Whenever his temper flared, I would quietly press the button, slipping the phone into my pocket or leaving it on the counter. Sometimes the arguments were short bursts, a few minutes of raised voices. Other times they stretched into long tirades, his words circling back again and again, each repetition heavier than the last. I captured them all, each file a piece of a puzzle I hadn't yet decided how to solve. There were nights when I lay awake, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, replaying the day in my mind. I thought about the way he looked at me when he was angry, eyes narrowed, lips pressed tight. I thought about the way he always insisted I was the problem, that I was too sensitive, too dramatic. And I thought about the recordings tucked safely away waiting. The night of the shattered phone was the turning point. The argument had escalated quickly, his voice rising, mine trying to stay steady. He grabbed the phone from my hand, his anger boiling over. The crash was sudden, violent, final. He looked at me with a twisted satisfaction, convinced he had destroyed the only evidence of his temper. I stood there, silent, my heart pounding. He didn't know that every recording, every word, every outburst had already been saved beyond his reach. That moment was both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because his rage had crossed into destruction, liberating because I knew he hadn't won. The pieces of glass on the floor weren't the end, they were the beginning. After the phone shattered, I remember sweeping the pieces into a dustpan, my hands trembling. He had already stormed out of the room, muttering under his breath. I crouched down, staring at the fragments. Each shard reflected a sliver of light, like tiny mirrors showing me the truth I had tried to ignore. My husband's temper wasn't just stress. It was a storm, unpredictable and destructive. I thought back to the first time I saw that storm. We had been married only a few months. I had forgotten to pay a bill, something small, easily fixed. His reaction was swift, his voice sharp, his words cutting. I remember standing in the kitchen, clutching the paper bill, wondering how such a minor mistake could spark such fury. He calmed down quickly, apologized, even laughed about it later. But the memory stayed with me, a warning I didn't want to acknowledge. Over time the warnings piled up. A slammed door when dinner wasn't ready on time. A clenched jaw when I disagreed with him. A sharp tone when I asked a simple question. Each incident chipped away at the picture of the man I thought I had married. And yet I stayed. I told myself it wasn't that bad. I told myself he loved me. The family dinner incident was harder to ignore. My relatives saw it, felt it. The silence at the table was heavy, uncomfortable. My sister's smile faded, my mother's eyes narrowed. I wanted to disappear. Later, when I tried to explain how humiliating it had been, he brushed it off. "You're too sensitive," he said. "You make everything bigger than it is." His words twisted around me, leaving me doubting myself. That doubt was what led me to start recording. I needed proof, not for anyone else but for me. I needed to know I wasn't imagining it. Each recording was like a lifeline, a way to hold on to reality when his words tried to erase it. My friend's warning added weight to the recordings. "Denial can be dangerous," she said. I thought about her words often. I thought about the danger of pretending everything was fine, the danger of ignoring the storm. The recordings became more than reassurance. They became protection. The night he shattered my phone, I realized just how important that protection was. He thought he had destroyed everything. He thought he had silenced me. But he hadn't. The recordings were safe, stored beyond his reach. As I swept up the pieces of glass, I felt a strange sense of power. For the first time, I knew I had something he couldn't take away. For the first time, I knew I wasn't powerless. When the pieces of my phone were swept into the trash, I thought the silence that followed would suffocate me. But later that night, sitting alone at the kitchen table, I opened my laptop. My hands trembled as I signed into the cloud account I had almost forgotten about. And there they were, every file, every recording neatly waiting for me. His voice filled the room again, sharp and unrelenting, echoing through the speakers as if he were standing right behind me. Relief washed over me, but it was tangled with fear. I had proof, yes, but proof meant responsibility. Proof meant I could no longer pretend his temper was just stress. I clicked on one recording at random. His voice roared through the speakers, accusing me of things I hadn't done, twisting my words until they no longer belonged to me. I flinched, even though I knew it was only a recording. My chest tightened as I listened, but I forced myself to hear it all. Each outburst was sharper than the last, each accusation more calculated. It wasn't random. It wasn't just anger. It was control. Over the next few days, I listened to more recordings. I noticed patterns. He always raised his voice when I questioned him, even about small things. He accused me of disrespect whenever I disagreed. He repeated the same phrases, almost rehearsed. "You never listen. You twist everything. You make me the bad guy." The words were like a script, one he had memorized and performed over and over. I realized his temper wasn't about the moment. It was about power. I began organizing the recordings. I labeled them by date, by incident, by the trigger that had set him off. Some were short, only a few minutes of raised voices. Others stretched on, long tirades that circled back again and again. I built a timeline, each file a piece of evidence, each label a chapter in a story I had lived but never fully acknowledged. It felt like building a case file, though I wasn't sure yet what case I was preparing for. One evening, as I sat at my desk with headphones on, I didn't hear him come into the room. His voice startled me. "What are you listening to?" he asked, suspicion lacing his tone. My heart raced. I clicked the window closed and turned to him, forcing a calm smile. "Just music," I said lightly, hoping my voice didn't betray me. He narrowed his eyes, studying me for a moment longer than felt safe. Then he shrugged and walked away. I sat frozen, my pulse pounding, knowing how close I had come to being discovered. That moment taught me caution. I became more careful, more deliberate. I listened only when I was alone, headphones always in place, laptop angled away from view. I backed up the files again, this time to a second account hidden under a name he would never think to search. My secret archive grew stronger, safer, more organized. But the weight of it pressed on me. I couldn't carry it alone forever. The recordings weren't just proof for me anymore. They were proof for anyone who doubted, anyone who thought I exaggerated. I needed someone trustworthy, someone who could help me understand what to do with them. I thought of my friend, the one who had warned me about denial. But this time I needed more than a warning. I needed guidance. So I made an appointment with a counselor. Sitting in that quiet office, I explained what I had done, my voice shaking as I admitted I had recordings of his temper. The counselor listened carefully, her expression calm but serious. "You've taken an important step," she said. "You've documented what many people dismiss. This isn't exaggeration. This is evidence." Her words steadied me. For the first time I felt validated. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't being dramatic. I had proof and someone else saw its value. So I hesitated. Sharing the recordings felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But the counselor encouraged me to bring a few files to our next session. "We'll listen together," she said. "We'll decide what they mean and what you want to do with them." That night I sat at my desk again, headphones on, listening to his voice. I chose 3 recordings, each one showing a different side of his temper. One short, one long, one filled with repeated accusations. I copied them onto a secure drive, my hands steady now. It felt like preparing for battle, though I didn't yet know what form the battle would take. The next session I handed the drive to the counselor. She listened quietly, her face unreadable. When the last recording ended, she looked at me with a kind of quiet certainty. "You're not exaggerating," she said firmly. "This is real. And now you have a choice." Her words lingered with me long after I left the office. For the first time I felt the power shift. The recordings weren't just hidden files anymore. They were a weapon, a shield, a truth that could no longer be denied. And as I walked home that evening, the city lights flickering around me, I realized something. My husband thought he had destroyed my phone, destroyed my proof. But what he didn't know was that the truth had already escaped him, living safely in the hidden archive I had built piece by piece. The counselor's words echoed in my mind as I walked home that evening. "This is real. And now you have a choice." That sentence carried me through the door, past the familiar silence of the house, and into the moment I had been avoiding for years. My husband sat in the living room, his eyes flicking toward me as I entered. He sensed something had shifted, though he couldn't yet name it. I didn't speak right away. I let the quiet stretch, heavy and deliberate, until he finally asked, "What's wrong with you lately?" I met his gaze, steady for the first time. "I have proof," I said softly. His brow furrowed, confusion flickering across his face. "Proof of what?" I opened my laptop, my fingers calm though my heart raced. With one click his voice filled the room. The recording played, his words sharp, his tone unmistakable. He froze, his face draining of color. For once he couldn't twist the moment, couldn't claim I exaggerated. The evidence spoke louder than his excuses. "You recorded me?" His voice trembled between disbelief and anger. I nodded. "I had to. You kept telling me I was imagining things, that I was exaggerating. But this is real." He tried to twist it, of course. "You betrayed me," he spat. "You made me the villain." His words were sharp, but they no longer pierced me. I shook my head. "You did that yourself." I just pressed record. The silence that followed was suffocating. He paced the room, his hands clenched, his face flushed. But the recordings kept playing, one after another, stripping away his defenses. He couldn't deny them. He couldn't erase them. The next day I shared the files with my counselor. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried weight. "You've endured so much," she said. "Now others can see what you've lived with." Her validation steadied me. For years I had carried the burden alone. Now someone else bore witness. I decided to show a few recordings to my sister. We sat together in her kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator filling the pauses. When the first recording ended, she pressed her hand over mine. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered. "But I didn't realize it was this bad." Her words broke something inside me. Years of silence, years of doubt. For the first time I felt seen. Words spread quietly among those closest to me. Friends who had once brushed off my concerns now listened with wide eyes. Family members who had doubted my sensitivity now understood. Each reaction was a piece of validation, each face a reminder that I hadn't imagined it. My husband, meanwhile, grew restless. He tried to reclaim control, insisting the recordings were taken out of context, that I had provoked him, that I had betrayed his trust. But the evidence was too clear. His excuses fell flat, his words hollow. He was cornered and he knew it. One evening he confronted me again. "So what now?" he asked, his voice low, his eyes dark. I looked at him, calm. "Now I decide," I said. The words surprised even me, but they felt right. For the first time, the choice was mine. My emotional journey shifted in ways I hadn't expected. Fear gave way to strength. Doubt gave way to certainty. I realized I had options. I could leave. I could demand accountability. I could rebuild my life free from his shadow. I began to imagine a future without him. A future where I wasn't walking on eggshells, where I wasn't shrinking under his temper. A future where my voice mattered, where my truth was heard. The final resolution came quietly. I packed my things, each item a step toward freedom. He watched, silent, his face unreadable. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I simply walked away, my dignity intact. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a strange calm. The recordings weren't just proof of his temper. They were proof of my strength. They were the evidence of survival, the story of resilience. And as I stepped into the night, the cool air brushing against my face, I knew the reckoning was complete. He had tried to silence me, but the truth had spoken louder. I carried it with me, not as a burden but as a reminder. I had endured, I had fought, and I had won.